break down the latest in Mets land and what is a jam-packed show for each and every one of you this evening. We're going to be breaking down Cody Bellinger, trade fits for the New York Mets that's been reported versus maybe what hasn't been reported at this point, a bit on the trade chips regarding the New York Mets, Tarik Skubal, what's happening with him and his market as we have some key news to break into on his front. We're also going to talk more on Freddie Peralta and a lot of other topics here in Mets land, along with answering your comments, questions, and concerns. So thank you guys kindly. Appreciate every single one of you. Now let's go ahead and deep dive the latest in Mets land. And let's start with what you guys can see beside me here. And Steve Lane, thank you so much for becoming a member. I really do appreciate that. So if my son is tired about hearing about Bellinger, I don't blame him. Yeah, that makes sense as to why he woke up. That's funny. But as you guys can see, Cody Bellinger put on Instagram earlier today a photo of him working out. Now, again, this probably means nothing, but it's always just fun to kind of show, because we're at that point in the offseason where we're going to be buying into the smallest slivers of information. Even if it doesn't really make sense, we're going to try to spin it and make it make sense. And as you guys can see on Instagram, we have two notable things. We see one, Juan Soto liking the post. Again, I don't really think that means much. Soto follows Bellinger, but so do a lot of other players in the league. But then you see another man, in Austin Wells, the teammate of Cody Bellinger this past season, putting a crying emoji. Why would he put a crying emoji? Is he putting a crying emoji because A, he wants Bellinger to return and he's just upset because he hasn't returned yet? Is it B, he knows Bellinger is gone and he's just upset because he's not going to be with his dog anymore? Is it C, something that's completely irrelevant from what I just said in A or B? I'm not entirely sure there. But what I am sure of is that the Mets want Cody Bellinger really, really bad. And you know how I told you guys yesterday how it wouldn't be surprised if the Mets go north of 4 years for Cody Bellinger? Well, what if I told you they've already done that, okay? Don't be surprised should you inevitably find that out, okay? That's the one thing that I'll be a little surprised if it doesn't become public at any point in the fairly near future in the next couple days. However long this is going to drag out regarding Cody Bellinger still is most certainly not for lack of effort on the Mets end, but it is also something to bear in mind that the trend that we have seen this offseason regarding the Mets' pursuit of Bellinger, and this is more so in hand with just their pursuit of players in general this offseason. The commonality has been the players that the Mets have been mostly linked to, the players that we have seen things get leaked out to the media, either by those players' agents or maybe from the Mets side, probably not from the Mets side, but, you know, just playing devil's advocate here. We've seen the trend of moves the Mets make are typically not moves that we saw coming all that much. The moves that the Mets didn't make are all moves that, you know, we thought that they were going to make, whether it's Edwin Diaz, to a degree Alonso, but that depends on who you talk to. Obviously, Kyle Tucker used us big time that we just saw. I was buying way too much into the Astros and Mets connections and Troy Snicker, and maybe that did help a little bit in negotiations, but clearly not enough. So all I'm saying is that it's really interesting to evaluate the Bellinger stuff, because the Mets have steadily been in his market for pretty much the majority of the offseason that we've known about. We've talked about him extensively since the offseason began, because one of my first offseason videos was way too early offseason targets for the Mets, and I had Cody Bellinger in that conversation, because especially with the Alonso uncertainty, he felt like such an obvious fit with his ability to play both the outfield and obviously the infield at first base. So all I'm trying to get at here when we talk about the latest with Bellinger is, please take everything either with a grain of salt, buy it more to it. Just do whatever is most comfortable for you. I don't want to try to steer any fan in a specific direction, make them think that's a lock to happen, because I have had my fair share of very unfortunate situations where I just get excited as a Mets fan, and I think that naturally the Mets are going to be in a great position to land the player, and they could be in a great position to land a player. But being in a great position to land said player and actually landing them are two different things. So my personal opinion on Cody Bellinger, where things currently stand, the Mets are in a great position to land him. However, if he wants to go back to the Bronx, and if he wants years, he's not going to be a New York Met. It ain't going to happen. You know what I mean? So it really is going to come down to what is the biggest priority for Cody Bellinger? Because if Cody Bellinger at all has a similar priority, which was the case with Kyle Tucker, which ended up being absurd AAV, shorter term with opt-outs, because let's not forget that Kyle Tucker turned down 10 years, $350 from the Blue Jays. So clearly length only meant so much for him when he was just trying to prioritize how much can I maximize my value on a year-by-year basis. Now, I understand when you compare and contrast someone like Tucker versus someone like Bellinger, obviously they're not the same profile, but they're also in different circumstances. Tucker is coming off of this past season where he was in a rental year and a one and done with the Cubs. We knew, however, that prior to that, you know, this was a build-up with him and the Astros as to what were they going to do with him in his future. Were they going to extend him or were they going to deal him? And obviously they dealt him in the end. Cody Bellinger has been going on 3 straight seasons or so of trying to get that longer-term bag and having yet to do so. Whether it was obviously during his time in Chicago, in which it didn't work out, where they essentially salary dumped him, to now being with the New York Yankees this past year, the commonality is that Cody Bellinger, a Scott Boras client seeking north of 7 years that we've seen after the Yankees put in a very lucrative contract offer of 5 years, 160 with opt-outs after the second and third seasons per multiple reports. So it has been for really a lack of effort on the Yankees end, but we know this story with how the trend of the offseason has been. I think Kyle Tucker is the greatest prime and latest example, as is the case of Bichette. You have to overpay for these guys, especially if you're not as desirable of a locational land as, say, the competitors going after them. So with Bellinger, it's a bit of a unique situation because with Tucker, you were dealing with the Blue Jays, who just made the World Series. They're so desirable of an organization, the team that spent the most money out of any club in baseball so far this offseason. And then you have the LA Dodgers, who are the big bad Dodgers, who don't need to pitch and sell you as to why you should go there, but it's up to you if you actually have the interest to do so. With Bellinger, it's different because when you look at the market that we've seen with Cody Bellinger this offseason, and of course you guys see the baseball savant numbers beside me, his elite defense, his ability to play plus defense in center, left, right, and first is what makes him so attractive. But for Cody Bellinger, his market's fascinating to me because you look at the New York Yankees as a team that's very much putting their foot down, very stubborn, and very much under the impression, at least what they're doing through the media or their media posturing between themselves and what they leak and what Scott Boras is leaking for his camp and for Bellinger. We've seen the collide here. And the commonality that we have seen over the years is that the Yankees, unless it's like a Juan Soto player that they still missed out on, obviously, they don't like to do bidding wars, okay? And they really don't like to move the needle for a free agent player as much greater of an overpay than what they're currently throwing out there. That's why they gave Max Fried 8 years, even though Buddy was already about 30 when he signed with them. That contract's going to age like milk. Max Fried has dealt with slight ailment each of the past number of seasons right now. He's a stud southpaw, but he's not getting any younger, and the idea that that contract is going to age well, I'll have to see it to believe it. The Yankees prefer these longer structured contracts because it lessens the AAV. They don't want to deal with the absurd, absolutely obnoxious 90+% tax by spending, around 300 plus, whatever the official number is for the Steve Cohen tax. Whereas Steve Cohen, the wealthiest owner in baseball by far, who literally can buy a player in the snap of his fingers and not think twice about it, he's in a circumstance where the Mets know they're already pushing the needle big time on what their luxury tax threshold is looking like for this upcoming season, but they're blowing through it after bringing in Bichette because it's impossible for them not to, knowing how much of upgrades they need to do for the roster. Even if they trade for players, which we know they inevitably will, you're going to have to take on those salaries, and they could be obnoxious salaries. But the Mets are in such a greater position than the Yankees when it comes to their ability to freely spend because Steinbrenner is acting very stubborn. He's a schmuck. He doesn't want to spend what you have to do in today's free agent market because the Yankees are still clinging on to the exact same thing that John Henry and the Boston Red Sox are doing. It's these old school, established organizations with historic long-term success, and they believe that their long-term success should trump the notion that they should do a drastic overpay for a player. Because why wouldn't you want to be a Boston Red Sox? Why wouldn't you want to be a New York Yankee? The problem here, and this is what the Yankees are going to have to learn the hard way unless they, again, get smarter in how they're approaching Bellinger, is that you have to give to get with players that obviously have inflated markets. And Bellinger is the most attractive bat and overall player available in this free agent class, you could rightfully argue now that both Tucker and Bichette are off the board. So you have the Yankees with their stubborn spending. They're apparently not willing to go past 5 years, 155 to 160. If I'm being honest, you know the old saying how, when someone, actually tells you who they are, believe them because they'll give you the signs early. And how we saw the buildup with the Pete Alonso sweepstakes, that if any team is willing to go more than a couple years that they will land that player, that 1,000% held true in the end regarding Alonso leaving the Mets organization. And the Mets aren't losing sleep over it because they always anticipated that. I think we should approach Bellinger similarly here, barring changes. If the Yankees are comfortable with where they are at, if that's truly accurate and it's not just for the sake of trying to get negotiations to pick up more in their favor, he is not going to be a New York Yankee if he at all has an appetite to go short-term high AAV. Because you want to know the team that's going short-term high AAV for Cody Bellinger? Oh, yeah, it's literally the player that we're talking about right now. And Cody Bellinger and the Mets. The Mets are approaching him short-term high AAV per Will Salmon's report as of yesterday. Jury's still out as to if Bellinger has the appetite to accept such a thing. But the reason why we reiterate this is because if the Mets can somehow, some way bring in Bellinger, give him $40+ million a year, before you say, Wardy, what are you smoking? That's insane money for a guy that's probably only going to be league average or, above league average by 15 to 20% with his bat. Here's the thing. One, it's not your money. So it already reaches a moot point. Okay? So the opinions are relevant from that point on. But secondly, it's the fact that Bellinger fits this club more than anyone else that's available. And I've said this for literally at least 3 months consistently. And I'll say it again because it's obvious. It makes too much sense why Cody Bellinger should be in a Mets uniform versus being elsewhere, okay? The Yankees obviously would love for him to be batting alongside Aaron Judge again and go on from there. As a Mets fan, I would love nothing more than a guy that's a clear perfect team need. And on top of it all, what makes Bellinger so gorgeous as a team fit is that the Mets don't have to go out of their way to still trade or sign for a first base profile player, because there's not a chance in hell Jorge Polanco is going to be getting the majority of reps at first base next year. I got a bridge to sell you, because I really don't think that's going to happen. Even if they don't land Bellinger, I think that they will land someone more defensively sound to help platoon those reps there. But if you land Bellinger, it's the best situation imaginable from a defensive construction standpoint. And for Carlos Mendoza, it's music to his ears because he gets to find all these different unique ways to configure the lineup. When you have a player that can play 4 different positions on the back of their hand, do you guys not understand how valuable that is? I saw someone in Yankee space, and I'm blanking on his name right now, and I sincerely apologize for that. Him and I, we have good conversations back and forth on X. I've done segments with him in the past. I'm just having a complete brain fart, so I sincerely apologize. He runs Fireside Yankees, if you guys know that YouTube channel. And he put on X yesterday basically saying, why would the Mets want to invest in Cody Bellinger when he's not going to really be much above league average as a batter at Citi Field? I'm like, buddy, do you not understand that players will adjust to new parks that they're in the same way that he properly adjusted to Yankee Stadium? You think he won't adjust to Citi Field? He shouldn't just buy into Baseball Savant's metrics from how it would have been if he was at Citi Field this past year, because that doesn't hold true in the end because he wasn't there. He's always going to have greater comfortability with whatever ballpark he's playing in at home versus on the road more than likely. Do I think his numbers are going to be as good as what they were offensively last year? Probably not. But that's not what you're buying into in Cody Bellinger. The plus is the fact that this is a guy that can get you anywhere from 20 to 30 home runs, anywhere from 75 to 100 RBIs a season. Very much a Brandon Nimmo profile in that regard. But here's why Cody Bellinger is 5 times the player that Brandon Nimmo is. When you have a player that can play elite defense in 4 different positions, that is what you're buying into. And if the Mets are really adamant on emphasizing this great defensive versatility and plus defense, they're not doing themselves any favors with the current infield configuration that they have from Bichette to Polanco. So at minimum, what they can do is by bringing a certainty defensively to help balance everything else out. So whether that's 3 years, obviously we're looking at like 120, 130 million total. Whether that's 4 years and we're pushing this thing big time, north of, 160, 170, whatever the case may be. All I know is that Cody Bellinger is someone that if the Mets do not land in the end, it's not for a lack of effort. So as we compare and contrast the Bellinger sweepstakes for the Mets versus not only the Yankees, but also the Toronto Blue Jays that you guys seen the highlight there beside me, the Blue Jays, I would say there's a level of concern that they may land him. I just don't know the appetite for the Blue Jays on one to go all in on Bellinger, because Bellinger isn't the same profile exactly as Tucker. And also Tucker and the Blue Jays ties had a lot to do with guys like Miles Straw and George Springer really trying to reel them in more than just why he was a team fit. It made even more sense because of the current relationships that he has with the Blue Jays organization. Bellinger, of course, knows players. I'm sure he's played with some of the guys on the Jays currently, but again, it's not the same circumstance. So how much of an appetite does a team like the Toronto Blue Jays have for someone like Cody Bellinger? I'd imagine that at this point in time, from what's been reported and what we know publicly, that they are going to be very, they're going to be cautiously optimistic in a pursuit for someone like him. I don't think that they're going to bend the knee. I don't think they're going to go out of their way to try to land Bellinger. I think that they're just going to be involved in his market and see if they can swoop in or if this is something where they're going to be on the outside looking in the way that they were for Kyle Tucker in the end. So outside of the Toronto Blue Jays, there's one other team that we're actually going to talk about regarding multiple players, not just Cody Bellinger, but I'm constantly thinking about them, because if you're going to offer $7,200 to Bo Bichette, why wouldn't the Phillies pivot the way that the Mets did? But instead of pivoting and going for Bichette, they pivot and go for Bellinger. Because here's why. The Phillies can't run it back with their core group of an offense. They just can't do it, okay? they've shown you yet again with this latest failed playoff run why they need to break a bit away from their core, but still keep the foundational pieces, i.e. Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper at minimum, okay? Guys like Alec Boehm, to a degree Bryson Stott, to a massive degree Brandon Marsh, and Nick Castellanos. What do those 4 players have in common? They're all 4 players that the Phillies can get a proper suitor for in a need-for-need trade. They would have done it yesterday, okay? They've been trying to move this core out a bit, and they've been trying to bring in new pieces in. To upgrade defensively, it would make sense alone to bring in someone like Cody Bellinger. Bellinger, there's an outfield fit right now for the Phillies. And there's a greater outfield fit if you trade a guy that really you should have dealt a while ago when you had the opportunity, and that's Nick Castellanos. So, not the Yankees, but the Phillies are a team that I would definitely keep an eye on as these sweepstakes continue. They may not be heavily involved at all in the end when this is all said and done, but I'm just trying to say that we shouldn't count anyone out here, okay? And you know how the trend has been this offseason where some of the signings that have been regarding teams that you didn't hear any reports of prior. I think Atatsuwa Imai to the Astros is a great, latest example. Bichette to the Mets is another prime one too. The reason why I reiterate this is just because of what we know has been reportedly out there, that one doesn't mean it's always going to be true, but 2, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing going on, okay? There's so much more that goes behind the scenes regarding player pursuits, especially now that you're kind of reaching a bidding war for Cody Bellinger and his services. And the reason why I'm not going to say it's impossible, but while I'm cautiously optimistic that Bellinger won't go to a team like the Dodgers, is because Bellinger to the Dodgers was a far more seamless fit prior to bringing in Kyle Tucker. Now when you look at the Dodgers, they really don't have an obvious fit for Cody Bellinger when looking at their outfield. And first base is going to be handled fine with Freddie Freeman. The Mets can take so much more advantage of a Cody Bellinger signing than any other team that's pursuing him. And this is not a slight on the Yankees and their pursuit of trying to bring him back, nor is it a slight on the Dodgers and other organizations. But the Mets have such clear team need for a profile like him. Will Sam reiterated yesterday that the Mets are in the market for an outfielder that can play all outfield spots, essentially. We know the Mets see Bellinger and the upside that he has, the ability to handle the New York market is what reigns supreme, that he showed handsomely this past season. Again, I can go on and on and on and on and on about why Cody Bellinger is an obvious fit for this club, but what I'm going to do now is leave it up to you guys watching live at a replay. It's a simple yes or no question, so don't overthink this one. Is Cody Bellinger going to be a New York Met? Give me a simple yes or no. Spam it in the live show to people watching the replay. Let me know in the comments down below. While you guys and gals go ahead and do that, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Help us get a 500 plus likes to our live and recurring viewers. It means a lot. Let me also get to these donations, everybody, and then we're going to get on from there. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. I know I missed a couple here. Francis, thank you for the donation. Steve Lon and Lamar, thank you so much for becoming members on the platform. I appreciate that a lot as well. Lamar, thank you for the $10 holla. God bless to you and your fam. And we got Mr. M. Alvar, I believe stood for Alvarez, 12 with a $5 holla. Wardy, never apologize for being a good dad. Kids are a blessing. Thank you for what you do, and let's go Mets. Thank you kindly, my friend. God bless to you and yours as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That really does mean a lot to me. But now let's go ahead and let's see what the ratio is in people for or against landing Cody Bellinger. And we're seeing, I'd probably, if I had to estimate just from how the chat is looking, we're looking at least 93 to 95% Bellinger at the moment, okay? So it's more emphasis on for. To the people that are against Bellinger, because you guys are in the minority right now, let me know why. Do you not want Bellinger because you prefer someone else, say via trade? If so, please enlighten me. Are you a big Jarren Duran guy? Is that why you're doing this? Do you not want Bellinger because you just think that the Mets are better off without a player profile like him for some odd reason? Let me know in the chat, to the few that are against a Cody Bellinger landing with the New York Mets, why you're against it. And for those that say they need pitching, we are well aware. You have to realize, believe it or not, teams can multitask in the offseason. They can actually go ahead and add starters, add relievers, add outfielders, and add infielders all in one fell swoop when the dust is settled in one offseason. I know it's hard to comprehend for some, but I have to reiterate it because, again, some people genuinely believe that the Mets and other teams approach an offseason like, oh, yeah, you know how we have a clear hole and a team need? Yeah, we're not going to do anything about that. Guys, please understand how working the markets works, and the players that are available for the Mets that they want are all still out there. So you have nothing to be concerned about when it comes to the Mets' pursuit of pitching. They will be landing an ace caliber starter this offseason, a guy with massive upside. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And I hope they land two, but at minimum, you got to land one. Love Cody, but same time, I would love Bader instead. I would love both of them, not one or the other, okay? Because you're buying way too much on Bader's swing adjustments this past year as a certainty that that'll hold true moving forward. And if he does come back down to earth and bats as a below league average bat again, then you're cooked. So no, I would like both, not one or the other. Jay Muscle, thank you so much for the $20 holla. Great member. Thank you kindly for that, brother. Really does mean a lot. Hoping the best for you and your family as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you guys for all those kind words and remarks. I appreciate it. But right, so that's what we got on Cody Bellinger. So I'm not going to bark up that tree anymore. If you guys want to hear more opinions and thoughts on Bellinger, feel free to ask me and I'll address them the best I can before we wrap up the show. Because now, guys, to go on from Cody Bellinger, let's get on to our next topic in this one. And I think you guys are going to enjoy this topic quite a bit. I mean, it depends on who you talk to, actually. You know, I might be getting ahead of myself here. Let's go ahead and do the following. So one little tidbit regarding Cody Bellinger, even though you guys likely know this already, but I just want to reiterate it, is the following, as you guys can see here. And I'll show you guys both because I talked about it yesterday about Ha-Seong Kim after signing, you know, the $20 million AAV or so with the Braves this year is cooked and he's going to be out like 4 to 5 months with injury. I'm not saying that they would have swooped in and gave us a run for our money for Bichette, but thankfully things worked the way that they did because if the Mets didn't sign Bichette yet and the Ha-Seong Kim injury would have happened, I guarantee the Braves would have swooped in the market and did something that's not usually an Alex Anthopoulos thing to do, which is to go short-term high AV for a player, but Bichette probably would have been an exception for them to consider. Separate from that, Bob Nightingale of USA Today, friend of the platform, reiterated this morning, the Yankees open the week still awaiting on a decision by Cody Bellinger. They're sitting at 5 years, 160, as we said, with no deferrals and 2 opt-outs. If the Toronto Blue Jays or Mets decide to beat it, they'll be hit with a 110% luxury tax penalties. The standoff continues. And again, if the Mets are going to bite this much of a bullet on a player, has to be worthwhile. But here's why I think a player profile like him in particular is worthwhile. The reason why I think Bellinger is so worthwhile as well is because he doesn't have the qualifying offer attached. You don't have to worry about giving up absurd draft pick compensation the way that you already did with your 2nd and 5th round selections and dollars for Bo Bichette after he declined the qualifying offer for the Toronto Blue Jays. So that's what you need to know on the Bellinger front. But now let's go ahead and get to this as well, everybody. Also, this is an interesting note here from Sarah Lanes. And shout out to Sarah Lanes. I hope she's doing well. I know that she's going through a lot. If the Mets start Bichette and Polanco at 3rd and 1st base, respectively, on opening day, they will become just the 2nd team in the last 100 years to start 2 non-rookie infielders on opening day with no more than 1 prior MLB game at that position. That's kind of crazy, seriously. So, again, if David Stearns is really going to pride himself on building this team's defense, it goes without saying, you're not going to have opening day be Polanco, your first baseman, and Bichette at 3rd. Bichette's probably going to be at 3rd, but Polanco at 1st, we'll have to see it. I'll worry about it once we get there because I do think the Mets are going to be adding more there. I really do. Let's see. Squarehead, thank you so much for the $10 holla. Give Belly high AV 3 to 4 year deal. Exactly. King Cohen made $250 million in 2 hours worth of day trading today. Love you, Wardy. I love you too, my guy. Thank you so much for the donation. And I think we're in unison. I 100% agree. Give him short-term high AV, which is exactly how the Mets are approaching him right now, and get it effing done. Now, I thought this was interesting from John Harper. Shout out John for SNY, as we know, as you guys can see on X. Strong reaction to Philly over Mets swooping in to sign Bichette as Phillies thought they had a deal. From the Phillies Show podcast, Jim Salisbury, it feels like the heist at JFK from Goodfellas. That's hilarious. The word livid was used in the front office. Oh, that's amazing to hear that the Phillies were that pissed. Also, Ruben Amaro Jr., former Phillies GM and Mets first base coach, the 3rd member of the Phillies Show podcast, called the Mets signing of Bichette a panic move. So I understand. I'd say the same thing if I was in Philly fans' shoes, but context is important. And you would think that someone that has that kind of pedigree and background would do a sliver of homework. I understand it's not easy for Philly fans or the people that cover them to do the slightest thing, which is to quite literally 2 seconds of homework, because then you'll know very easily exactly how the Mets were able to court and land Mr. Bo Bichette without a problem. And here's how. The Mets approached Bo Bichette beginning at the winter meetings. They kept steady dialogue throughout the entire offseason from that point on, from literally the 2nd week of December. Mind you, that was over a month ago. And over this past week, before the sweepstakes of Tucker reared its head and came to a conclusion, they had approached and met with Bichette and basically reiterated their continued interest in him. And the Mets all along were in the market for both Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker. Does it mean that they were going to land both players? Of course not. That's obviously in hand as to why they didn't in the end. But the reason why I reiterate this is because of the fact that the Mets had all the groundwork done with Bichette already. This was nothing new. This was already signed, sealed, and delivered. All they needed to do was hash out the details to make it become a reality, which is exactly why the night after Kyle Tucker lands with the Dodgers, breaking news: Will Sam and Bo Bichette's a Met, 3 years, 126. That does not happen unless the groundwork is already done. So, again, I understand people out of Philly, they still have their panties in a twist. I would have them too, even though I understand it's not that hard to get a nod out. I'm just going to say that. Let me just make it very easy, okay? The Mets had all the groundwork for Bo Bichette. If they didn't, they would not have signed him the way that they did. And that's where you can give credit to David Stearns. For everyone that wants to give flack to David all offseason long, and I understand it to certain degrees, you can't just be the type of fan that's like, for everything that goes right, you only thank Cohen, but everything that goes wrong, you only blame Stearns. You're not only being a hypocrite, you're constantly contradicting yourself, but more than anything else, you don't have a clue what you're talking about, okay? And that I still get approached by fans, and they know who they are, and this is not a personal slight of them. I mean, people I know I'm friends with, like, people genuinely believe still that the Mets have meetings and approach players without David Stearns being the guy spearheading it. Steve Cohen, regardless of what Steve says or does, he's not the guy that's making these decisions. He's not the one that's single-handedly calling the shots. I know this in great confidence. So it's funny to me. Like, of course Steve is going to have an influence. He's the one signing the checks. Of course he's going to share input. Of course him and Alex are going to come together and tell the player how much they should come here because we're great with club hospitality. It's so lazy more than anything else to genuinely believe something of the contrary, because that just is simply inaccurate. It's not true at all. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So that's the latest on that front. Let's continue on, everybody, because to talk a little bit more on the Phillies, as you guys can see here, per John Morosi, so take it with a massive grain of salt, because John Morosi and breaking news are two things that tend to not go in hand. I'm still waiting for Shohei Ohtani's flight to land in Toronto. You guys let me know if it's actually landed yet. Framber Valdez is a potential option for the Phillies, per John Morosi, as you guys can see here. And he is a potential option, but this is more of just kind of the same thing that I would be saying that I've been saying the past week. Framber Valdez, I think, is actually a pretty logical fit for the Philadelphia Phillies, and that is something to bear in mind, because here's why. Do I think the Mets can land Framber Valdez? Yes, absolutely. I still think that they can. And to the credit of Will Salmon, he stated in yesterday's article that the Mets very well may be willing to still sign a guy with a qualifying offer attached, regardless on how much draft pick compensation they're giving up. They're far more focused on the actual dollars that they're spending to a degree than they are that draft pick compensation. So, okay. All right, let's play devil's advocate, and let's say that the Mets, at the right price, have an appetite for Framber Valdez still, okay? I think that they're going to land a starter in the trade market before that they even consider signing someone like Framber, but I could be wrong here. The Phillies are in a better position to land Valdez now because they have not signed a player with a qualifying offer attached the way the Mets just did with Bo Bichette. They have money to spend, and after losing Ranger Suarez, they have a clear team need for, obviously, not just any pitcher, but it might not hurt them to go ahead and just land Valdez, who can be that veteran southpaw replacement for Ranger Suarez. Suarez goes to the Red Sox at 5 years, and we see the Phillies, who did not want to go there, may have an appetite for someone like Framber Valdez, so I'm sure it will be more shorter-term, higher AAV. Because you also have to realize the Phillies are going to probably approach Valdez in similar fashion how the Mets did with Bichette, because you'd have to think that they're going to finally learn to take a page out of the playbook, right? Dave Dombrowski can't be that stupid for that long, right? He can't be thinking, oh, we're just going to approach everyone long-term with low AAV and think that that'll get the job done, because that's not what's going to get the job done in today's market whatsoever. So, Framber Valdez, I'll be not shocked or surprised if the Mets land him, but I'll be a little taken back if they land him, just because I'm really, really confident that the Mets are going to be trading for a starter at minimum, and they may sign another starter separately. But I think if they sign a starter, that starter might be more of lesser quality, more on the sake of being quantity to back end your bullpen / swayman like Griffin Canning, who the Mets are actively in the market to potentially bring back, as it's been reported over the past 48 hours. So let me know, guys, in the live chat, are you for or against Framber Valdez? I definitely want to know your thoughts on him. Definitely let me know, everybody. Because now this is where I think you guys are going to enjoy the conversation more, okay? There he is. There he is. Look at that sweet smile. Yeah, I don't care. You can say whatever the hell you want about me. Listen, I'll get giddy about guys when they're literally this effing good that can give you north of 7 WAR for your 2026 season, okay? I'll gas him up. I'll compliment him. I'll call him every nice thing under in the book. You name it. He deserves it. When you're a back-to-back Cy Young Award winner, you deserve everything that's coming to you in the best way possible. And Tarik Skubal deserves to not be a Detroit Tiger anymore. Because why? The Tigers aren't going to spend on him. They're in the largest hiatus of an arbitration dispute in MLB history actively. And he has all the writing on the wall on a guy that will not be in that organization beyond the 2026 season. So what is the latest regarding Tarik Skubal? What is happening with Tarik Skubal? Let me enlighten you. Here's what's happening. Per Buster only of ESPN. And I know, you could take it with a grain of salt, or you could think it's the most important thing imaginable. You guys are completely up to feel however you want to feel about where the source is. Who the source is, rather. And I quote, "There's been even more activity around Skubal in terms of preparing for possible trades since this arbitration situation popped out. Common sense, but it's good to hear that reaffirmed from people who are on salary to say exactly that, those common sense things." And the reason why I say that is if this is being relayed, it's obvious that it's continuing to happen. And Tarik Skubal, everybody, how much time you got? Okay, what? It's 9:05 p.m. Eastern. I could go the next 24 hours telling you extensively why Tarik Skubal should be a New York Met, why the Mets should go out of their way to land him. And for every single one of you who are watching this right now, they're saying, "Wardy, I like you," or I enjoy the content sometimes, but I can't stand the Tarik Skubal talk. I want nothing to do with trading for a starter that's a rental when you'd have to give up a dump truck of assets. My reply to that is, respectfully, I couldn't care less, okay? I'm so foot down on Tarik Skubal and doing whatever it takes to land him because you don't sign Bichette to then half-ass your offseason. I don't know why that's hard for some people to comprehend. But you don't sign a player to $40 million a year with opt-outs unless you're going all in for the season. What is Tarik Skubal an all-in move for your organization? And why would you trade for him? To try to get an advantage in negotiations. Because as much of a schmuck that Scott Boras is, Scott Boras has made more money with Steve Cohen than any other ownership group in baseball since he became owner 5+ years ago. It is in his best interest. It is in Skubal's best interest to be in an organization and to be with a club that actually has the dollars to spend on you. That's what the Mets have. The Mets can trade for Tarik Skubal and still give him $400 million and hopefully not think twice about it and actually get these negotiations done. When you have a Tarik Skubal asking for $32 million in arbitration, which is $1 million more than Juan Soto's record-breaking at $31 million, if I'm not mistaken. And the Tigers are at, what, 18 or 19 right now? Like, what are we doing here? It's just going to get nasty. It's going to continue to get messy. Seriously, what are we doing? I just don't understand it. The Tigers have their heads so far up their ass because they think, okay, you know what? Even though Tarik Skubal's definitely not going to be here a year from now, we need him. We need him so bad to win just for us to be kicked in the first round of the playoffs. We need him so bad just for us to not do enough for the rest of the roster and hope that in-house development is what carries us through and through. That's the Tigers' mentality. They don't want to spend. They're not going to spend. The Mets will spend. And Tarik Skubal, the back-to-back reigning Cy Young Award winner, is every single thing. Here alone, he brings so much value to you. So much effing value to you. Like, do you guys not understand how valuable a 6.6 WAR pitcher is? Like, let me enlighten you. It's really, really valuable, okay? That's why he's basically the best pitcher in baseball in every effing statistic that you see beside me. For context, if you're 100 in baseball and 1 percentile, you're the best. If you're first, you're worst, okay? He's basically 100 in everything. For everything that he's not 100, he's league average. And barrel percentage, ground ball percentage, and extension. Everything else is basically north of 100. He's just insane. When you have a guy that can sit 100 consistently with his fastball, when you have a player who had 100+ strikeouts with his effing changeup this past season, when you have a player that has that's getting more of that playoff experience each of the past 2 years, which, mind you, the guy who kicked his ass most in playoffs this year is on the Mets now. That's Jorge Polanco. He took him deep twice for the Mariners against the Tigers in the playoffs this past run, which is just crazy to think about. Love Polanco for that. Skubal, it's okay. He'll make his adjustments in the Mets lab with Justin Willard, right? But the Mets have everything, literally everything, humanly imaginable to present and to offer to this club and the Tigers to make a trade happen. Oh, what? You want MLB-ready assets? All right, let's go through the laundry list. Let's do this as if I'm having, like, all these dollar bills in my hand, right? Let's go. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's break down those MLB ready assets, okay? Starting from the top, let's begin with pitching. Christian Scott, Brennan Sproat, Jonathan, that's 3. That's 3 right there. Okay, now let's get on to the infield. Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty, Luis Angel Cunha, Ronnie Mauricio. Okay, we're already at 7 players. 7 MLB-ready position players. Now, I understand they won't have the appetite for all of them, but I'm just trying to say the Mets have a lot of guys that they don't need right now that they can trade as being part of a surplus and a deal for Skubal. There you go. 7 players. And we're not even mentioning the potential idea of trading one of Kodai Senga or David Peterson if they really wanted an MLB pitcher back that can impact them greatly to a higher degree that we know on paper than what, say, Scott, Ton, or Sproat can do for them. And if the Mets want to add 2 starters this offseason, you have to part ways with at least one via trade. So that's also why it would make sense. And then you get into the farm. From literally Jet Williams down, anyone would be available. And I say Jet Williams down because Carson Benj will be at number 1. And Benj will not be going anywhere. But do you guys see what I just said? We're looking at easily 10 plus assets of players I just relayed. And while I understand that quantity doesn't necessarily equal quality, if you are in the position and the shoes of the Detroit Tigers, you want to maximize the quality in said deal. But what I'm trying to get at is that the Mets literally have so much pieces that they can bring to the table right now, I'm sure they already have, to make a trade happen and not lose sleep over it. Whereas if you look at some other clubs for their MLB-ready assets that they may have to part with, those assets may still be too prominent for the organization as is right now, okay? I see someone in the chat talking about Tatis. Yeah, no, we're not going to talk about Tatis tonight. But someone did mention clickbait, not in regards to the stream, but just in general. And I would like to share something real quick. There's a schmuck. He knows who he is on X, who's went around the past 24 hours, making Mets fans think that the Mets have been in trade talks for Yordan Alvarez. I can tell you in confidence, the Mets are in 0 in trade talks for Yordan Alvarez. He posted that because he wanted to really see if the algorithm would pick it up because he's just trolling. The guy literally attended MLB winter meetings when he's just a baseball fan with no writing, no content made or anything like that, just for the sake of taking a pic to be his profile pic so that way he looks somewhat credible. It's all part of the plan with being a troll, and I understand that. But I just want to reiterate that because someone literally emailed me right before I went live a graphic of Yordan Alvarez with the Mets. 0 truth to that. Stop buying into the aggregator accounts constantly and stop buying into the first single thing that you see also on Instagram, because they're worse on Instagram than they are on X. Because on Instagram, you have massive accounts. The worst one, they know who they are. Starts with an N, a Y, and an M, and you guys can figure it out from there. They literally act like anything that's whispered in the ear is fact because they're just trying to make their money because they make money with the impressions, with the likes, with the amount of follows that they get throughout a weekly, monthly basis. I know how this works because I literally do social media for a living. I cover the Mets for a living. So just want to reiterate that to those that are maybe unaware. But to get back to it on Tarik Skubal, everybody, again, this is a slam dunk of a fit for the New York Mets in more ways than one. And I think you could rightfully argue that after the Mets effed around and did something really important, which is, what did they do? They signed Bichette. That creates a greater potential of someone like, as we just stated, and as I will say again, as Tarik Skubal to now become more likely. And before you say to yourself, Wardy, why does this make sense? How does this make sense? Again, it's pretty simple. The Detroit Tigers have been reportedly in the trade market for Brett Beatty for the past calendar year at minimum. And they still have not an obvious fit as to what their third base is going to look like. Brett Beatty would be a clear fit for those Detroit Tigers after they failed each of the past 2 seasons to bring in Alex Bregman. Bregman was really close to signing with them on a longer-term contract a year ago. Then the Red Sox swooped in, short-term high AAV, $40 million a year, and the rest is history. So the reason why, again, I want to say that is because there have been connections going on for a little bit now, greater than I think maybe what you guys have realized regarding the Mets' connections to the Detroit Tigers, specifically with Tarik Skubal here, that you guys can see. And I love Skubal. I don't think there's anyone that fits this team better, because when you think of Skubal from a player value standpoint, the idea of bringing in a flamethrowing southpaw who could give you 200 innings next season, pitching to between a 2 and a 3 ERA, but closer to a 2, an amazing K to walk ratio where he's just going to dominate the strike zone, eat hella innings, and potentially lead the league in strikeouts, as he had 241 this past year. He's just such a bulldog. Like that at the front of your rotation paired with Noel McLean is better than any other thing that the Mets could do this offseason. Yes, you heard that correctly. I think Tarik Skubal is so valuable that he would be, without a doubt, a more impactful immediate pickup than even Cody Bellinger. Because as much as I like Cody Bellinger, Skubal's still a more valuable player than him. Which to do when, mind you, you've only had 31 games in the season instead of Bellinger playing literally 162. It's very impressive. It's very impressive for Skubal to be as important of a player that he is for that organization. So the Tigers desperately want to keep Skubal because they know if they lose out on him, they're going to be down 6-7 wins next season. If you're the Mets, you want someone like him desperately because he's the kind of guy that moves this rotation into more of the contention of, oh my God, the Mets have quietly one of the better rotations in all of the National League now. And in order for them to get there, they have to pounce on a move like this. Because here's the thing. If the New York Mets don't pounce on a move for Tarik Skubal, who do you think is going to? It's the team with the best farm in baseball per MLB pipeline, and it's the LA effing Dodgers. If you want to have any reason to care about next season, if in case you still have a sliver of hope and optimism the way that I now do, you have to make sure the evil umpire doesn't get better than what they already are. And that's out of our hands naturally as fans, but you just have to hope and pray that we don't see Skubal trade this offseason just to land with the Dodgers in the end. Because if that happens, genuinely, there's no point in watching. And I'll say it again. There really is not if we get ourselves to that point. But it's good to know that the trade talks are appearing to pick up regarding Tarik Skubal. We know the Mets have literally a jump truck of assets that they can offer. So I guess my question is, everybody, out of all the assets that I relayed, from the pitching to the prospects to the infielders, what player do you think would be the greatest needle mover in a trade to land Tarik Skubal and his services? If you had to narrow it down to one single player that we broke down, to give me a quick blank in the chat and the comments down below, please let me know. And thank you guys kindly for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Where do you rate my trade? Beatty, Vientos, Turen, Sproat, Tom, Weniger, and Serrano for Skubal. That's so much. But if I'm looking at it, let's see. Ton, Weniger, Serrano. I feel like you're giving up one too many pitching prospects in that group, knowing he's a rental. That feels steep. It feels like that would be a tough pill to swallow if you gave a Weniger, Ton, and Sproat in that deal. Everything else is palatable, but I think you take one starter away in that conversation. Peterson, Ton, and Beatty. Yeah, most of you guys are saying Ton. Okay, noted. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. We talked about Tarik Skubal. I love Tarik Skubal. I think you love Tarik Skubal as well. If you haven't smashed that like and subscribe button on your way in already, please make sure to do exactly that. It's really appreciated. We got more topics to break down in Mets land, so let's go ahead and do exactly that. Let me just make sure that everything is set up on my end, and we can kind of go from there. Alrighty, guys and gals, let's get this thing cooking and going. Okay. Points, and can you discuss Gallen? Absolutely. You know, if you want, we can just do a quick segue and talk quickly about Zack Gallen, because actually that's a perfect segue. We talk about Framber Valdez. Let's talk about Zack Gallen. We don't have to be along with him. We'll go from Gallen to Peralta to Outfield trade fits a bit more, and then that's going to do it for the show. So that's the order that we'll go in. So let's begin here with Zack Gallen. I understand a lot of people don't want Zack Gallen, and I don't blame you for maybe not wanting Zack Gallen, because he's not an overly attractive player for the Mets to want to go ahead and land. However, Zack Gallen doesn't at all have a good market. He's not going to get a long-term deal. He wishes he would get a Dylan Cease 7 years, but that ain't going to happen when Buddy was batting practice in his walk year. You just can't do that shit. And while Gallen has been an unlucky pitcher before, ironically, both him and Dylan Cease had great stretches this past season, being two of the most unlucky pitchers in baseball. But as I stated from Will Salmon's reporting a day ago, the Mets aren't completely opposed to adding another player with a qualifying offer attached, but it just needs to make sense. It needs to be the right fit and the right situation for them. And I don't know currently if Zack Gallen checks off enough of those boxes. That's Mackenzie Gore. Just disregard that for a second, because I had the graphic in the raw name slot. I clicked on Gallen, and of course I get Gore. Whoopsies, that's on me. Okay, here's Zach. And the funny thing, too, is that before 2025, I would have been salivating all over Zack Gallen. I've liked Zack Gallen his entire career. I've always been a fan of his. And I like the fact that he's an East Coast native, too, from South Jersey. So this is a guy that, whether he goes to the Phillies or the Mets, I do think is kind of destined to land in the National League East. And you want to know something? I wouldn't be shocked if a team like the Washington Nationals even landed someone like him or put in a flyer. I wouldn't be shocked if that actually came to fruition. I really would not be. Gallen is a player I like for his ability to eat innings and also be a guy that has upside to be as good as anyone in the middle of your rotation. The problem is that Gallen's floor currently is as bad as your worst starting option in your rotation right now, and you're going to have to give solid AEV to land him, right? Think about it. What could you get Zack Gallen on right now? Could you get him on maybe just a 2-year deal? Could you get him on a 2-year deal with an opt-out after one? Could he get him on that kind of bridge deal, the way that Blake Snell signed with the San Francisco Giants or Jordan Montgomery a couple years ago? Could he go down that route? You can, but I'm just, again, do the Mets have the appetite to give up even more draft pick compensation for a guy like Zack Gallen? I don't know. It feels like it's a no, but I don't know genuinely. So I'll let you guys be the judge regarding Zack Gallen. Again, he has upside, can eat innings, and that's attractive about him. He can give you north of 200 a year. You want that in your rotation. And you know that he's coming off of a down season, but that might be the exact reason why you buy in on him. And my counter to that is, I don't hate the idea of Zack Gallen, but he can't be your end-all be-all if you're going to actually add to this rotation. Because if the Mets left around and started the rotation next year with Zack Gallen, or was their big pickup, is there even a point in watching? Like, I wish I was joking more there than what I currently am. My damn seat keeps lowering. I apologize for that, everybody. It happens. It's automatic. It literally every now and then will just sink down when I'm not asking it to do that. But that's what I have to say about Zack Gallen. Again, don't love him at all. I don't hate him. But for what you have to give up, I feel like the Mets can probably do better than what is currently presented from them, though. You guys let me know your let me know your thoughts regarding Zack Gallen if you're for or against a player pursuit like him. But all right, Zack Gallen is one thing. Let's talk about a starter that we would love. And I say it for that reason because, again, I really do think that Freddie Peralta would be a sick upgrade in this rotation. I will say this, though. As much as I like Freddie Peralta, it all comes down to what is happening with LA. I don't know how much the Mets can kind of dictate their moves based on what the Dodgers do or don't do. It's a hard thing to do, and that's not how you want to operate as an organization. But knowing that the Dodgers are heavily involved, knowing that the Yankees are involved, you really just think about what's the trickle-down effect, right? If Freddie Peralta got traded to the Dodgers, the Mets have to get Skubal. Like, they literally have to, or else they're screwed. If the Yankees got Freddie Peralta, you got to make sure you're still trying to get Skubal. And you probably are going to be then in a huge, huge trade asset bidding war for him with the Dodgers, which is not pretty. Freddie Peralta is one of these players that the Mets are able to land. A, they have all the assets to make it happen because they have the MLB-ready talent, especially pitching, and that's what the Brewers are in the market for, young pitching. But if you land someone like Freddie Peralta and you look at this rotation, you still probably want to add one more starter, even if they're more on the back end. Freddie would finally help bring you that balance of certainty of a frontline starter that he can pair along well with Noah McLean among others. I would say trade for Freddie Peralta and bite the bullet on the QO and sign Framber Valdez. That's what I would do if I'm David Stearns and the New York Mets here. Because then you have a rotation heading into next season in a win-now stage where you have, in any which order, any which way, Peralta, McLean, Valdez, Holmes, Peterson, Manaea, Scott, Sproat, Todd. And we're not even mentioning like a Griffin Canning reunion because that probably wouldn't happen then. Like if that's your 1 through 9, and of course it really would be like 1 through 7 because you're likely going to trade one of those stars. I didn't even mention Senga, so there you go. That's my point. You're likely going to have to trade one of them if you add two. But I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. If the Mets signed Framber Valdez and traded for Freddie Peralta, they could have a rotation. If they don't trade Senga, but they still may, but if they don't, then Peralta, McLean, Valdez, Senga, Holmes, that's 5. Peterson, Manaea on the outside looking in. Again, don't buy into the configuration as much. I'm just trying to say here is that it would make a lot of logical sense for the Mets to trade for a starter and to sign for one. I don't think that they should just do one or the other. They could trade for two, not opposed to that either, but I don't think the Mets are moving in the right direction this offseason if they only land one starter, because I think it's the same story that we have every single offseason. Have you guys not paid attention? Every single offseason as we get to spring training, injuries inevitably happen. The Mets are down a starter or two, and you want them to add, and they don't because they don't want to act in desperation. Now's the time to add when you don't have to act in desperation. When it's the time of the offseason to do so. When the markets are looking the way that they're looking, and before you actually get things settled and get yourself set for spring training and then the regular season, okay? So for the countless years under Steve Cohen, in which instead of landing two starters, the Mets have landed just one, now's the time to go ahead and F around and land two. So that's what I have to say about that. Bro, it's a great 20-win roster. Thank you so much. Great member of 44 months. I'm surprised that you didn't tell me that we got to add Thomas Sapucki to really make it a great 21-win roster at minimum. Thank you kindly for chiming in. But I want to hear from you guys regarding not only Freddie Peralta, but everything else with the Mets' pursuit of pitching. Because we know that they've been in the market to certain degrees of Mackenzie Gore, Chris Bubich as well, and various others. But out of all the pitchers that the Mets have been connected to, as well as guys that they haven't been connected to, like Gallen and others that we talked about, if you had to put on your David Stearns cap for a second, who do you think is the most logical fit as a starter for the Mets to land this offseason? Think of everyone that we've talked about. Think about guys that we didn't talk about as much in this one, even like Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, Mitch Keller, Sandy Alcantara. This is a laundry list of options. Out of all of them, who do you think is the most logical that the Mets can and will land this offseason, and why? Let me hear in the chat. Because now, everybody, going on from Freddie Peralta, one of the final things I want to break down for each and every one of you in this one before we get out of here is the outfield fits. Because we broke down more extensively guys like Jake Myers, Luis Robert, and Harrison Bader. We may touch one more time on Bader in this one. But there's a player that we talked about over the past couple days, but didn't yesterday, that I would like to again, and that's Jarren Duran. Because Jarren Duran has not been reportedly connected to the Mets, other than just don't be surprised if the Mets are the market for him. Most of you guys are saying Freddie Peralta. I completely understand where you're coming from. But Jarren Duran is one of these guys where if the Red Sox do have the appetite to trade him, it would make sense. And here's the thing. What do the Red Sox need right now? They need a third baseman. What do the Mets have? A third baseman essentially available in Brett Baty. What do the Mets need? An outfielder that can play center and the corner. Who's an outfielder who can play center and the corner that did that at an amazing clip in 2024, but didn't do it nearly as well in 2025, so he's fluctuated with his defensive value, and that's Jarren Duran. I love Duran for the moxie he brings on the mound. Not on the mound, I apologize. There in the batter's box, I love Duran for his ability to have great defensive range when he's right. He's an attractive player. Definitely someone who I think could be doing well. And as someone said in the chat, I'm mentioning Jesse Winker. I view Jarren Duran as kind of like a Jesse Winker type fit for this organization. From the type of personality that he has, to his role, to his ability to impact both offensively and have more defensive impact than Jesse, no doubt about it. Love Jesse, but who even knows if he's going to play next season with how bad things went for him with his injury this past year. But Duran is the guy that the Mets are going to get creative about a trade for an outfielder. He's probably the best option for them, or close to, right? You're going to have to give up some good assets, but you know the old saying that's been the trend with the Mets this offseason is that they really prefer to do win-for-win trades, kind of need for need, if you will. And Jarren Duran, Brett Baty, and sprinkle in a little bit more to get the job done ain't a bad idea. It really ain't. I don't think it's a bad idea at all. Look at his numbers this past season. Again, the 2024 Jarren Duran season was magical. 2025 was solid, but the defense wasn't the same. He was 11% above league average as a hitter in 2025. But let me just give you guys some greater context regarding Duran in particular. I'm going to just pull it up on my phone real quick as we take a look at his Fangraphs numbers for a second. And then once we're done breaking down Duran, we'll probably wrap up the show. I broke down Bader more extensively in yesterday's video, so I'll let you guys kind of be the judge regarding Harrison Bader and if you're for or against him. Like I said, I'm not opposed to Bader depending on the circumstance, but it really depends on the circumstance. Duran played 139 games and left this past year 28 in center, 2 in right, and 1 at DH. His numbers are down below, But his 2024 season is why you like the idea of Jarren Durant. And plus, he's going to be a guy that can steal you 30 bags in his sleep without a problem. That's another guy that could be a huge base running threat for this organization. I want more players that can come in and steal bags. Cody Bellinger can. Durant can probably at a greater clip. There's a lot of guys that check off those boxes. But Durant's best season came a year ago in 2024, in which in 160 games and 735 plate appearances, so basically the max, 21 home runs, 111 runs scored, 75 RBIs, 34 stolen bases, 285 batting average, 342 on base, 492 slug, which is about 40 to 50 points higher than this past season, and 31% above league average as a hitter. So he's had a 3-year stretch of being well above league average as a hitter since really establishing himself in the league. In 2023, he was 22% above league average. 2024, his peak at 31% above league average, and now came back down to reality bit at 11%. But here's the thing with Jarren Durant. In 2024, his defensive value was through the roof. He was a plus defender at plus 7.7 per Fangraphs defensive value. That's good for a 6.8 WAR season. Yes, Jarren Durant in 2024 had more value as a player than Tarik Skubal did in 2025. How the hell can that happen? That shows you that Durant still clearly has something special in the tank. It's about consistency. Because then in 2025, Durant still is a valuable player, but he falls off a cliff. Goes down to 3.9 WAR. He was 3 WAR higher the year prior or so. Like that's a big drop off. So the Mets would be hoping that they can obviously get him to get more of the 2024 level, the same way that they traded for Luis Robert, that they'd be hoping to get more of the 2023 level. We'll see if that happens. I don't think Durant is at all locked to be traded, but if we're focusing on team need and all the assets that the Mets have, this is why it makes sense. Wardy, I got Francisco Alvarez shirt last week for my birthday that says the troll. What's his contract? He's under club control for a while. Yeah, you don't got to worry about Alvarez. He ain't going anywhere. If you guys haven't already, help us get up 500 plus likes in the live chat. I really, really do appreciate that. Smash a like and subscribe on your way in, everybody. Thank you kindly. It really does mean a lot. And I am going to be getting out of here in just the next minute or two because we've already hit past the hour mark. But before I let you guys go and before we wrap up the live show for this evening, I do want to fill you guys in on a couple things. One, be on the lookout. We will have new content more than likely dropping sometime tomorrow, whether it's earlier in the day, breaking news, or sometime in the evening, whatever the case may be. We will have it for each and every one of you. I do like Michael Kopech. I like the idea of buying in on him. He's a big injury bug is the issue with Kopech, but you can take advantage of that, and I'm sure Stearns would be all over it. Sir Anthony Dominguez I like quite a bit too. I just don't know if the Mets are going to be willing to spend the dollars that he may ask for the type of reliever that he is. But be on the lookout. We will have more content dropping tomorrow. We will also be having some really fun content, like I said, on probably Thursday, barring changes. We will have Will Salmon on the platform, who is quite literally the best person on the beat for anything baseball this offseason. Not just Mets. We're talking literally anything. He's been the most accurate that I've seen to this point. I look forward to breaking down the latest in Mets land with him, as I'm sure he's going to have some really good information and nuggets that he hasn't previously relayed that he can kind of do here on the platform. So be on the lookout for all of that, everybody. I really do appreciate that. Where you mentioned not too long ago about watching a trade window of 7 to 10 days. We still watching? Yeah. Like I said, I said you can have that extend to January 27th. Yeah. January 27th would mark the 10th day. So again, we basically have another week or so. I'll be surprised if the Mets do not trade for someone of significance within that time frame. If it doesn't happen, I'll actually be surprised by that, just from all that I know to this point. It doesn't mean that it's a certainty. I'm just saying I'll be surprised. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got though. So again, thank you so much for watching. I apologize if I didn't get to as many people's comments tonight as I would have liked. If you guys couldn't tell, voice is raspy. It's getting worse as we're continuing the show. But under the weather, because it's that time of year when you have a little one to deal with that's always getting sick, naturally these things are going to happen. So I appreciate everyone's patience throughout this one. I hope you enjoyed the content. I hope you enjoyed the breakdowns, that everything that we broke down in this one thoroughly. And as always, once we get new information, we'll relay it here on the platform as we always do. So thank you guys again. I really do appreciate it. Have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. But as always, no matter what, let's effing go Mets, baby. Have a fantastic night, guys. Thank you again. Peace out.